Hello and welcome to Lore of the Cards, the series that looks to find the lore hidden in your Hearthstone deck. The subject of today's video was requested in the comments of my Worgen 5 Legendary episode, and it received a fair few upvotes, so I figured, why not, eh? I was also told it'd make a good Halloween episode. So I'm a little late there. Oops. Today, we'll be taking a look at stitched monstrosities that have appeared in Hearthstone sporadically since its release. Abominations. We'll take a look at their general history, how these Scourge creations would evolve into other horrors, and also find each individual Abomination card in WoW and tell you a little bit about them too, if they're present in the game, that is. Usually with Lore of the Cards we do a short little artist section, but with multiple cards that becomes a bit tricky. So, to start this video, I'm going to list the Abomination cards along with their artists. That way, you get a feel of just how many Abominations are in the game, and for what I consider types of Abomination, as the Scourge would create variants and improvements on the original design as time went along. We have our classic Abominations. Abomination by Alex Horley, Patchwek by Mike Nicholson, Sludge Belcher by Nathan Bowden, Ticking Abomination by Mike Sass, and Abominable Bowman by Ludo Lullaby and Konstantin Turovec. The Plague Dog variant, which Hearthstone players became acquainted to via Gluth by Luke Mancini. Whites, as depicted in the Stalagg and Feugen cards by Danny Orizio. The Flesh Titan variety, depicted by Thaddius by Matt Dixon. The Furnacefire Colossus by Steve Prescott is a flesh giant. Grobbulus by Alex Garner is an earlier type of flesh giant. Our final variety are the Flesh Beasts. Rotface by Anton Zemskov and Festergut, who I sadly don't know the artist for, are examples of this abominable evolution. I'd also consider Steve Prescott's Stitched Tracker to be an abomination, but this is the only example of this abomination type in all Warcraft games. So, now you have a feel for just how broad I consider the term abomination is in the Warcraft universe. Let's begin, shall we? Abominations first appeared in Warcraft during Mission 3 of the Human campaign of Warcraft 3, Ravages of the Plague. Arthas Menethor, Prince of the Human Kingdom Lordearon, had been sent to deal with numerous problems arising in the kingdom. Firstly, he dealt with a troublesome group of orcs attacking the town of Strambrad. Then, moving to the kingdom's northlands to investigate a plague ravaging the populace. It would not only be Arthas sent to investigate. Suspecting the plague may be magical in nature, the Kirin Tor of Dalaran sent their young agent Jaina Proudmoore to investigate as well. Once lovers, Arthas and Jaina remained good friends. Travelling down the King's Road out of the region of Ulterac, the two friends would investigate the villages and towns they came across. Complications happened early on, the bridge in the first town having been destroyed, and the party having to deal with a group of bandits attacking the town. There was an alternate but far more treacherous route through the shallows of the river, multiple hostile Murloc groups calling it their home. Arthas and Jaina's abilities were far too superior to be challenged by mere Murlocs, and would manage to fight their way back to dry land. Seeing a group of footmen set upon by skeletal archers, they rushed to their aid. These local footmen had been attempting to save as much of their village as they could. When Arthas reached this village mere moments later, it became clear how insurmountable that task was. Houses were ablaze, and skeletons swarmed upon the small party. After defeating the skeletons, Arthas turned to the footman's sergeant for answers as to what they were.
Undead, my lord. This whole village has gone mad. We did our best to defend the villagers, but...
Vowing to get to the bottom of the village's fortunes, Arthas and his party travelled to the end of the village, where a granary stood tall. Disturbed, Jaina noticed that the land around the granary looked as if it were dying. This was when Arthas first began to suspect that the grain may be the means with which the plague of undeath had spread. a suspicion that would later prove to be true. As they continued on, it seemed as though none of the villages along their route had survived the plague. While the party did come across some signs of life, such as high elven priests that had travelled to the land to try and heal it of the curse that now seemed to linger, and a single dwarven mortar team defending itself from waves of skeletons, on more than one occasion they found themselves having to deal with the seemingly unrelenting dead. The elves told Arthas that there was an infected grain house at the end of the town of Brill. To try and quell the plague in the area, Arthas made it his mission to destroy it. Making their way through Brill with help from the mortar team, they would come to the grain house. But it was not abandoned. A mage dressed in black, wearing a skull upon his head and surrounded by undead, was tampering with the grain house. The mage, who would later be revealed to be the mortal Kel'Thuzad, fled upon Arthas' arrival, sending ghouls and another monstrosity to deal with the heroes. This being towered above the other undead, a bloated mass sewn together from a collection of different human corpses. Its creators had deemed it necessary to give it an extra arm, allowing it to wield additional blood-stained rusted weaponry, a meat cleaver, meat hook, and a hook and chain. While this had been thought of, no effort had been made to stitch the monster's stomach. Its intestines and other vital organs hung out, inches from trailing along the floor. The smell of it was so putrid that the air surrounding it was thick with flies. This hideous amalgamation of flesh and bone was the first abomination observed by anyone among the ranks of the Alliance, a being so intimidating, so hideous, that even Arthas and Jaina flinched at the sight of it. As Jaina began to make observations about the creature, Arthas shut this down, stating,
"Let's study it after we kill it."
The human forces clash with the undead. While the ghouls fell with relative ease, the abomination was another matter entirely. The humans hacked away, but still it stood, dispatching several human soldiers with its grim rusted arsenal. Eventually, with a distorted roar, the abomination collapsed, defeated. Obviously, many more abominations were added to the Scourge ranks after this, a highly effective design that remained the Scourge's most powerful melee land unit throughout the event known as the Third War, where the Scourge would sack Lordearon and the High Elven Kingdom of Quel'Thalas. They would then assault Dalaran and use the Book of Medivh to summon the Burning Legion to Azeroth. While the Legion would ultimately fall, the Scourge would remain strong. Arthas, now the corrupted champion of the Scourge's leader, the Lich King, would defend his master from Illidan's Stormrage, ascend his master's frozen throne, and bind with him to become an even more powerful iteration of the Lich King. Even when faced with powerful enemies like Illidan, Kael'thas Sunstrider and Lady Varsh, Abominations remained a crucial piece of the Scourge war effort. The non-canonic Warcraft RPG states that while they are a creation that looks extremely rough around the edges, creating an abomination is a complex necromantic process, and one that was even improved upon during the period of the Third War. They were created in the undead slaughterhouses. Necromancers with not only a great understanding of their craft, but of science as well, piecing abominations together within the building. Necromancers not only have to reanimate abominations, but stitch them together in a way that allows the creature to function. They also require some knowledge of healing, so that each body part introduced to the abomination's form is actually usable. The process of animating an abomination calls for a blasphemous conglomeration of souls to be incorporated into the body parts that make up its form. These souls come together to form one united soul, which means an abomination is not only classified as an undead, but also a construct, a rare classification combination. When completed, the average abomination stands at around 8 feet tall. The necromancers of the Scourge slaughterhouses were able to improve on the abomination's design with their disease cloud research. Every body part of an abomination is infected with the plague of undeath, but this research took this further, creating abominations so rank with disease that it would affect those they fought with, either bringing them some degree of pain or weakening a foe just that little bit extra to allow the abomination to carve open their flesh. The disease was so thick it came off the abominations in clouds, which persisted even after their deaths. Despite being made up of multiple different souls, the abomination retains none of the memories of these souls. They are only known to surface in times of unusual stress or great pressure. The constructs are near brain dead, loyal slaves to their creator, any necromancer or death knight with the skill capable to command them. Abominations have a basic feel for combat tactics, such as attacking the strongest in an enemy group if given a simple order to attack them without specifics. Relying solely on an abomination's tactical senses, however, is a poor idea. While an abomination lacks intelligence, they are able to understand common speak and speak it themselves.
What we do?
Well, with varying degrees of success. While abominations are extremely powerful, said to have the strength of 10 men, they are relatively slow and sluggish. While the most powerful part of an army swarming a city, their slowness can be a burden in small strike forces. Abominations excel at guarding a position. Not needing to eat or breathe, they can stand in one area for up to hours on end, even if it is underwater. They remain in one position and pulverize those that come too close. This is how they are primarily used within the Forsaken, for example. The Forsaken were a group of undead that broke away from the Lich King's command during the assault from Illidan's Stormrage that weakened the King's powers. Led by Lady Sylvanas Windrunner, the Forsaken would occupy the sewers beneath the ruined capital of Lordearon. Some of those that broke away from the Scourge brought with them their knowledge of creating abominations, and deep within the Undercity's apothecarium created city guards for this fledgling empire. When the Forsaken joined with the Horde, the faction would find out just how many resources the abomification process took. Large quantities of blood and embalming fluid were required for each construct, and a powerful heart to pump the abomination's sludgy vital fluid through its rat's nest of veins. Abominations don't have to be made up of just human corpses. Grey's abomination was the first of these constructs created by Calder Grey. He stitched it together using the body parts of orcs, humans, trolls and dwarves. To get a heart powerful enough to pump the vital fluids, he didn't even use a humanoid, placing a Kodos heart within the abomination. In the Legion expansion, even demon body parts were used in the construction of this variety of abomination. Lord Thorval constructed the abomination follower Rotgut for Death Knight heroes. While human body parts made up the majority of the abomination's form, its heart was that of the Inquisitor Tormentorum. Its entrails were that of the Observer Glazer, and its eye was that of Cordana Felsong, a Felsworn night elf imbued with the demonic fell energies of the Burning Legion. The brain of someone intelligent was needed to make an abomination, as the process of creation would greatly reduce that intelligence. The smarter the brain was starting out, the smarter the abomination. While still not smart, this goes some way to explaining abominations like Sergeant Gluth. Gluth led a small regiment of Forsaken soldiers against the Varikal in Northrend's Howling Fjord, as Horde and Alliance travelled to the continent to try and put an end to the Lich King. This made him one of the few abominations capable of command, Lieutenant Merp and Lieutenant Grummus being other examples. When tampering with brains, the trick for abomination creators would be to keep the basic nervous system intact, while removing the higher cognitive functions of the brain. This stopped the abominations from developing a conscience, keeping them easy to command. The best known abomination of this variety is the Gift from the Embalmer, the Terror of Darkshire and Hero of the Storm, Stitches. But before we cover him, let's look at other short stories regarding other abominations of this variety. Firstly, you have your named abominations that are just that little bit more powerful than the usual fare. Bloodfeast would turn on Arthas, who at this point had crowned himself King of Lordearon. As the Lich King's power waned, the hulking behemoth was bent to the will of the Dreadlords that remained behind after the Legion's defeat. They sought to avenge their defeat, as their efforts had been undermined by Arthas and the Lich King. Bloodfeast stood guard to Arthas' escape, but was defeated by the overthrown king. The Butcher was another Warcraft 3 named abomination, clearly a tribute to the Diablo demon of the same name. It hid within the recesses of the Black Temple and attacked the forces of Illidan's Stormrage as he sought to seize control of the temple from the Pit Lord Magtheridon. In World of Warcraft, a lot of named abominations are used as merchants or quest givers. Bitsy the innkeeper, Corpulus the food and drink vendor, the Knights of the Ebonblade Quartermaster Orzorg, and Gordo, Goutgut, Gristlegut and Vile the quest givers. Some are quest objectives. Two of the most memorable abominations for myself were Knucklerot and Luzran. I began playing WoW in the early life of the first expansion, the Burning Crusade. Naturally, as they were the new race added in this expansion, a Blood Elf was one of my first characters created. As their kingdom had been destroyed by the Scourge in the Third War, the Blood Elf's starting area's story tied in closely to this, coming into contact with many agents of the Lich King. As the Blood Elf heroes progressed, they made their way into the Ghostlands. These were once a part of the beautiful Eversong Woods, but after the March of the Scourge had fallen into disrepair, the land dying and many remnants of the Scourge invasion lingered here. Heroes travelled to the town of Tranquillion, a rare piece of Blood Elf territory in the area, held fast with aid from the Forsaken. Outside the small village's inn was a wanted poster that read, "A bounty is hereby declared for the abominations known as Knucklerot and Luzran. These dreadful creations of Darkhan are extremely dangerous and have been sighted patrolling near the Howling and Bleeding Ziggurats. Individuals seeking to claim the reward must present the abominations' heads to Deathstalker Rathiel as proof of the deed." As a quick aside, this quest is special to me, as it was the first group quest I did in World of Warcraft. There was a sense of wonder as Knucklerot and Luzran passed, monsters too powerful for me to defeat wandering the area I was the correct level for. It felt like a huge sense of achievement to partner with either my brother or sister, because I have no friends, to take these monsters down. Darkhan was a traitor to his people. In exchange for power gifted to him by Arthas, it was he who weakened Quel'Thalas's defences, which allowed the Scourge to assault and defeat the Elven Kingdom. He then sought to betray Arthas, but was swiftly killed for this transgression. Darkhan would be brought back to life on 2 occasions and slain both times. When Blood Elven heroes ventured into the Ghostlands, Darkhan was on his 3rd life as an undead, continuing to torment those he had betrayed from the Bastion of Deathnell. The Blood Elves sought to send Darkhan to his grave yet again, but before they could fight the elf himself, his forces needed to be weakened. Magister Idonis instructed heroes to defeat the Dark Elf's lieutenants: Duran the Deceiver, a Shade; Moffatt the Black, a skeletal mage; Midoran the Fallen, a skeletal warrior; and the Abomination Borgorth, the Bloodletter. Eventually, both Darkhan and his lieutenants fell. Most abominations revel in chaos, delighting in carving the flesh of their victims. This was not the case for Gory. Alliance adventurers ran into Gory in the Western Plaguelands. The farmers of the Writhing Haunt assumed that the abomination had been sent with the Forsaken Outrider to wreak havoc. When they first saw Gory, the farmers of the newly cleansed lands charged the abomination. They expected the abomination to fight back, but Gory paid them no mind. He didn't want to be a weapon. This abomination wanted to be a farmer. As Gory only wanted to help out on the farm, the lead farmer Thurman Grant put him to work. Gory's use was twofold, as Grant also used the friendly abomination as a combatant to train his fellows for combat, a skill they may need in new lands. Gory was content with his new life, That was until the Battle of Anderhall between Alliance and Horde. Gory observed as his friends took the fight to the Forsaken, and at first they appeared to be succeeding. That was until the arrival of Aradin and the Valkyr. Gory looked on with horror as his friends were killed and changed into weapons, forced into the life he was able to reject. Seeing his friends warped in this way caused the depressed Gory to go mad, attacking any who crossed his path, be they Alliance or Horde. Stitches is a creation of Abercrombie the Embalmer. Once a kindly alchemist and citizen of Ravenhill located in Darkshire, the Embalmer would be driven insane by the death of his wife Eliza. Unable to let her go, Abercrombie used dark magics to revive her, placing his still beating heart within her chest. While this succeeded in reviving Eliza, she was reborn with a hunger for human flesh. This meant Abercrombie needed to hide her away, keeping her buried in a shallow grave behind his shack. Posing as a frail old man, Abercrombie would collar adventurers that passed through. He explained he needed supplies from the town of Darkshire, but due to being so old and feeble, he'd never make the trip. His first request was for ghost hair thread, which he needed to put along his doors and windows to keep unwanted spirits away. The thread, made from ghost's hair, could bind evil spirits or sow life into inanimate objects. Abercrombie's requests did not stop there. He sent the adventurer to Darkshire again, this time to obtain a bottle of the liquor, zombie juice. This strong beverage, made from rot blossoms that grow on dead things, is said to be so strong it could wake the dead. Abercrombie said he needed it to keep him warm during cold, lonely nights in the perpetually dark, harsh environment of Duskwood. Still, Abercrombie was not done with the adventurer. A few weeks ago, the old man was picking herbs far from his house when ogres attacked. Too weak to stand against the ogres, Abercrombie fled, leaving behind his crate of tools. The ogres would steal them, taking them back to their home, the Volgol Ogre Mound. To Abercrombie's delight, the adventurer was able to retrieve his crate. Abercrombie, despite the adventurer's help, still didn't feel quite safe in his home. Duskwood played host to many undead horrors that walked the woods. Abercrombie was surprised he had not been set upon by these beasts. To make sure that didn't happen, he wanted to create a ghoulish effigy, a sort of scarecrow to keep ghouls away, fashioned from the ribs of the creatures after which it was named. With the ghoulish effigy completed, an elated Abercrombie handed a letter over to the adventurer. He explained that he and the Mayor of Darkshire, Ello Ebenlock, were old friends. Abercrombie was sure that Ello would be ecstatic to read how the adventurer had aided his old friend. Travelling to Darkshire, the adventurer handed the letter to Ello. As the mayor read the letter, his face immediately turned pale. Looking up at the adventurer, he said, "You fool, you've doomed us all." Abercrombie had deceived the adventurer. The items he had requested were not to make his home more secure, but to construct his own abomination, the giant Stitches. Mere moments after Ello finished reading the letter, Stitches was at the town hall's door, Abercrombie upon his shoulder. Darkshire's defence force, the Night Watch, rushed to stop Stitches. Try as they might, the Night Watch were unable to bring Stitches down. Only with the adventurer's help did they emerge victorious. Prior to the Cataclysm expansion, Stitches was an infamous mob, a level 35 elite that wandered through a leveling area designed for level 18 to 30 characters. Many a low-level character to wander into the Abomination's path would fall to his meat cleaver. This was because the quest operated differently prior to Cataclysm's release. In Cataclysm, the quest became phased. Only the player on the quest was able to see and deal with Stitches, like a mini dungeon instance out in the world. In earlier expansions, WoW lacked this technology, so when the letter was handed to the mayor, Stitches would spawn at Abercrombie's shack and make his way to Darkshire. It wasn't only Stitches that spawned, but two groups of Night Watch did too, blocking Stitches along his path. However, with no adventurer aid, these Night Watch patrols would easily fall before the Abomination. Heroes needed to attack Stitches at the right time to have any hope of defeating him during his seemingly unstoppable journey toward Darkshire. It is likely due to Stitch's infamous reputation before Cataclysm that he ended up in Heroes of the Storm, the best known abomination in WoW, represented in HOTS, all because of his penchant for mutilating low-level players. In Heroes, Stitch's lack of intelligence and the fact he's newly created are played up. Speaking in broken sentences, his violent acts are actually the childlike abomination wanting to play with his adversaries.
Stitches want to play.
In a way, Stitches has made 2 additional appearances in World of Warcraft, Abercrombie not finished with creating abominations. Stitches Jr. and Stitches Junior Jr. are elite battle pets, something for battle pet trainers to truly test their skills against. Abominations have also appeared as dungeon bosses in WoW's lifespan. The first of these adventurers would meet was Glutton in Razorfen Downs. Glutton is actually a lesser abomination crafted from the remains of one of the Scourge's most powerful abominations, Tartek the Enraged. Crafted by the Lich Amninar the Coldbringer, Tartek ran amok through the Quillbore territory. 1,200 of the swine were slain by Tartek before he was eventually felled. Acting quickly, Amninar resurrected the fallen Quillbore, binding them to his will. This gave birth to the Death's Head Quillbore faction. There is contradicting evidence that says the Quillbore willingly joined with the Scourge, though that's not quite as exciting as Tartek's involvement. Amninar was unable to recreate the abomination that went down in history of one of the Scourge's heroes for his service. Instead, Glutton was crafted from his remains. Glutton spent much of his time gorging on the rancid corpses of Quillbore. The rotting meat within his gut gives off a cloud of noxious fumes and disease, which emanates from the abomination, choking any that come too close. Ramstein the Gorger is considered one of the Scourge's most infamous abominations, found in Stratholme. It was the purge of Stratholme that arguably delivered Arthas to the hands of the Lich King to become his champion. Noticing the town was infected by the plague of undeath, it only being a matter of time before the villagers turned to undead, Arthas burnt every house and murdered any villager he could before they were claimed by the Dreadlord Mal'Ganis. Thinking the Dreadlord the leader of the Scourge, Arthas would follow him to Northrend, take up Frostmourne to defeat him, and be changed into the Lich King's champion through the King's whispers to Arthas through Frostmourne. Stratholme's fires never died, and Scourge forces would overrun the burning city. Ramstein, an abomination empowered by a ceaseless hunger, would commit unspeakable atrocities to countless innocent souls within the city. Ramstein remained deep within the city as one of its last lines of defense. In Wrath of the Lich King, heroes travel back in time to witness the beginning of Arthas's fall from grace, the culling of Stratholme. The abomination Meathook was the instance's first boss. Like Stitches in Heroes, Meathook sees his mutilation of his victims as some sort of playtime. Since Arthas's first encounter with an abomination, the creatures only became more menacing. Meathook was stronger, more toxic, and more agile than others of his kind. He was able to use his chains to disable ranged attackers. His noxious fumes were so pungent they could interrupt spellcasters mid-thought, and he could enter a frenzy, increasing the power of his already crushing blows. The final raid of classic World of Warcraft was Naxxramas, a raid that would return in the Wrath of the Lich King expansion, and it's here where many of the Hearthstone cards have their origin. The Sludge Belcher, added to Hearthstone through the Naxxramas adventure, was a standard mob found in the raid's Construct Quarter. Their moveset was fairly simplistic, but were one of the hardiest mobs within the raid. Like other abominations, Sludge Belchers had a disease cloud that emanated from them. This would inflict nature damage to heroes every 3 seconds. The Belcher's acidic sludge technique was where its power truly lied. As well as dealing a solid amount of damage to heroes, the acidic sludge would weaken an adventurer's resistance to nature-based attacks. This not only made the acidic sludge more powerful, but also the Belcher's disease cloud. Like in Hearthstone, the Sludge Belcher could also summon sentient sludge to aid it in combat, but didn't need to die in order to summon it. Since the Hearthstone card's release, Unholy Death Knights were given the talent Sludge Belcher. Perhaps it was named after this enemy due to the card's popularity in Hearthstone. This improved the Death Knight's Raise Dead ability, summoning an Abomination instead of a Ghoul. The Abomination was stronger and able to defend itself better than the Ghoul. The classic Abomination card relates to the final encounter of Naxxramas, Kel'Thuzad. In Phase 1 of Kel'Thuzad's fight, players didn't fight the Archlich himself. He summoned a horde of undead, which included soldiers of the frozen wastes, skeletons that slowly moved toward heroes at the room's centre. If they reached them, they would explode, causing large amounts of shadow damage. The Soul Weaver Banshees would cast Wail of Souls, damaging heroes and knocking them back. Finally, the unstoppable Abominations would charge the party, slashing at them with their Mortal Wounds ability, which would reduce healing received by heroes they struck. It is this Abomination that is depicted in the Abomination card, the artwork first being used for the Naxxramas raid set in the trading card game. We remain in the halls of Naxxramas' Construct Quarter for our final classic type Abomination, the first boss of this quarter, and the first boss of the fourth wing in Hearthstone's Naxxramas adventure, Patchwek. I did cover the bosses of the Construct Quarter at the time of their release, but for the sake of completion, let's cover them here too. In Hearthstone, Kel'Thuzad refers to Patchwek as his avatar of war, something the beast announces with joy in WoW.
Kel'Thuzad make Patchwek his avatar of war.
A title fitting for the largest and most powerful of this Abomination type. Perhaps only Tartek would have compared to Patchwek, though if the Archlich had any hand in his creation, I personally doubt Amninar's finest work would compare to Patchwek. Like many of the previous Abominations, Patchwek views combat as playtime, enjoying the act of shredding his victims, but always somewhat upset when they fall down dead, disappointedly questioning the corpse, no more play, as they lie motionless on the floor. Patchwek in WoW is considered a gear check raid encounter, one with relatively simple tactics but impossible to surpass if under-geared, and if defeated, a good indication that you are well geared enough for the rest of the raid, or at least in Patchwek's case, the Construct Quarter. Despite his size, Patchwek did not lumber around like other Abominations. He could attack with ferocious precision and speed. He would focus most of his attacks on a single hero at a time, the raid party's main tank, hailing blows down upon them. Patchwek would occasionally lash out at another hero that irritated him, one close to him with the most health, with his Hateful Strike ability, a devastating attack that would grievously wound whoever Patchwek struck. In Hearthstone, the ability would destroy a minion. Rather than become weaker as he neared defeat, Patchwek became stronger, entering a frenzy, which saw him attack 40% faster, with his damage increased by 25%. Patchwek's childlike personality also seemed to extend to his patience. After a mere 6 minutes of play, he grew bored with his playmates, entering a berserk state. His attack and movement speed grew by an astonishing 150%, and not only this, his swings became 5 times more powerful, making short work of anyone the Abomination chose to strike. Slime bolts would also shoot off from the Abomination, hitting heroes that were far away and infecting them with a deadly, rapid poison. Abominable Bowman and Ticking Abomination did not appear in World of Warcraft, being created by the Hearthstone team. The Bowman is the only example of an Abomination with the dexterity required to use a bow and arrow. Grobbulus would follow Patchwek, but I'll revisit him when we look at flesh giants a little closer. Naxxramas would be the first time heroes came into contact with the plague dog variety of abomination, in the form of Gluth. This abomination type would appear to be completely fashioned from animal parts. They would have been created after the Third War, as Gluth was the first ever sighting of a plague dog. Gluth's appetite was said to be so voracious that not even living flesh could quell his hunger. The white Feugen seems to have been Gluth's handler, feeding the dog a small army of zombies on a daily basis to curb its hunger, making use of the undead resurrected that were too weak to be of any use to the Scourge. Even when in the heat of combat with heroes, Gluth could not control his hunger. Any zombies that came close to the plague dog were consumed by it and revitalized Gluth. In combat, Gluth would savage his foe with his Mortal Wounds ability, reducing the effect of healing spells upon his target. He would also enrage, his attack speed increasing. This particular ability was carried over to Hearthstone, adding 6 attack to the Gluth hero. The Plague Dog's signature attack was also carried over to Hearthstone, being used as his hero ability. In Hearthstone, it would change the health of all minions to 1, just the enemies in Heroic. A similar effect occurred when fighting adventurers. Devastate would reduce the health of adventurers and zombies to a mere 5%. Not only this, any zombies were now compelled to move toward the hulking animal, being consumed if they reached Gluth. Gluth remained the only plague dog in WoW for a long time, additional ones only being added in the Wrath of the Lich King expansion. Most of them were named individually, the Corpurathar Guardians and the Grimmer Hounds being the only world mobs. Cerberon and Glon could be found on the outskirts of Sholzar Basin upon the Avalanche. This was where the Lich King's forces spilled over into the basin, one of its protective pillars being destroyed. Stinky and Precious are the final 2 plague dogs. They resided in the Lich King's fortress of Icecrown Citadel. They were pets of the flesh beasts Rotface and Festergut, created by the maniacal Professor Putricide. Both were similar to Gluth in combat, capable of using Decimate, but it was weaker, reducing heroes to 15% of their health. They too also used the Mortal Wounds ability, restricting the healing adventurers received. They differed slightly in their own ways. Stinky would use his Plague Stench to damage all that attacked him, the stench pulsing from him every 2 or 3 seconds. Precious would summon zombies, but lacked Gluth's voracious hunger. She would not consume them, but they would put infected wounds upon heroes, causing them to be more susceptible to damage. Awaiting heroes at the end of Naxxramas' construct quarter was the Flesh Titan Thaddius, a type of abomination guarded by 2 of another abomination type. Stalagg and Feugen are whites, classified as abominations despite there being no visible stitch lines like with other abomination varieties. This type of abomination most closely resembles zombies, their bodies becoming somewhat deformed. How this deformation takes place is unknown. Whites do have bolts in their necks, similar to the design of Frankenstein's monster, perhaps suggesting their creation is somewhat doctored. Like Frankenstein's monster, whites are not mindless undead, retaining much of the intelligence they possessed in life, though now with deformed, lumbering bodies. Another comparison that can be drawn between them and Mary Shelley's creation. Whites are a rare variety of undead, often employed in places of importance. Stalagg and Feugen guard the mighty Thaddius, both needing to be defeated in close succession before heroes can take the fight to Thaddius himself. Perhaps the most notable white in Warcraft lore is Magistrate Bartholus. In life, he was an ambitious young paladin, serving under Tyrion Fordring at Mardenholt Keep. Bartholus was ordained as a paladin shortly after the Second War, which saw the Orcish horde defeated by the Alliance of Lordearon. While his side were victorious, both Bartholus's parents were claimed by the war. As a result, the young man harboured a great hatred for the Orcish race. One day, Tyrion would stray from the keep. He would go missing for some time, and when discovered was gravely wounded and unconscious. Convinced an orc was responsible for Tyrion's condition, Bartholus would scour the countryside searching for it, even calling a respected member of the Silver Hand, Saidan Dathrahan, to aid him. Tyrion would recover, and he, Bartholus, Saidan, and Dathrahan's men would find Tyrion's attacker, the orc Eitrigg. They would attempt to capture the orc, but Tyrion, to Bartholus's disgust, would try to defend the orc. Unbeknownst to the young paladin, Tyrion and Eitrigg had fought, but the orc would rescue Tyrion from a collapsing watchtower. Eitrigg did not wish to win combat through dishonour, as a piece of falling debris had knocked Tyrion out. Tyrion would be arrested for treason for trying to defend Eitrigg. Bartholus would personally oversee Tyrion's prosecution, and served as a witness during the disgraced paladin's trial. As Tyrion had assaulted Alliance soldiers, the jury ultimately decided to strip him of his membership to the Silverhand Paladin Order and doomed him to exile. Uther performed Tyrion's excommunication, stripping him of any power within the Alliance. As a show of respect for the once honoured paladin, Uther refrained from exiling his family. Tyrion was sent home to collect his belongings and live out the rest of his years in exile. Bartholus began to make plans for Eitrigg's torture and ultimate execution. Before this could be enacted though, Tyrion returned, seeking to save the orc as he had once him. Tyrion was subdued, but not long after this a small army of orcs led by their war chief Thrall rode in to save Eitrigg and Tyrion. During this orcish assault, Bartholus would have a spear plunged into his chest. This grievous wound would not be the death of him, and with Tyrion now in exile, Bartholus inherited his position as Lord of Mardenhold Keep. This title would eventually be passed on to Tyrion's son, Taelyn. Sometime after these events, Bartholus would move to Stratholme, becoming a magistrate of the city. He would remain here until the events of the Third War, right up until Prince Arthas purged the town of life. Bartholus, along with many others, lost his life during the culling. Eventually, the Lich King would raise Bartholus and ordered him to guard his forever burning home. He'd alert other Scourge if heroes entered the area and, if necessary, use his strength to stop them. Another white dungeon boss that used to be in Warcraft before being repurposed as a quest objective in the Cataclysm expansion was the Ravenian. It once resided in the school for necromancy founded by Kel'Thuzad, Scholomance. The Ravenian made sure students remained diligent in their studies, because if they were not, it would devour them. Korag is also kind of a dungeon boss, though he would form one of 4 random mobs that fought alongside the troll Hexlord Malacres in Zul'Aman. Other named whites include the rare mob Grygon, Shambles, a merchant for the Knights of the Ebon Blade, and Janitor Edwards. Once the set-upon squire of Sui the Banshee, he is now the janitor of Acheras, home to the Ebon Blade Death Knights. After Stalagg and Feugen were defeated, the mighty flesh titan Thaddius would be jolted into life, one of only 2 flesh titans to appear in Warcraft. Thaddius is the epitome of the Scourge's perversion, an intelligent, powerful abomination made up of the sewn together corpses of women and children. Not only this, the Scourge didn't merely use their desiccated bodies to form Thaddius, they would bind the souls of those that created the Flesh Titan to its form. The innocent souls were trapped, unable to pass on to the next life. A wretched existence. As heroes traversed the corridors of Naxxramas, they could hear tortured screams, wails that would make their blood run cold. These were the anguished cries of the souls connected to Thaddius. Thaddius also made a short appearance in the Warcraft Ashbringer comic series, battling Darian Mograine and his party as they travelled to Naxxramas to save the soul of his father, Alexandrus. Pure electricity coursed through Thaddius's form, allowing him to use this against his foes. While his shocking assault was formidable, Darian was able to seize an opportunity, cutting the Abomination's head in 2. Naxxramas would continue to be a threat even after Darian's raid, and Thaddius was still present within. It seems that his head being severed in 2 was a small injury that could easily be rectified. Thaddius's trademark ability was his polarity shift, charging his opponents with electrical currents. If those with a positive polarity stood near a negative, they would both suffer incredible damage. This would also be transferred to Hearthstone in a different way, swapping minions' health and attack. The Flesh Titan Thrym the Hope Ender was created in a different manner to Thaddius. The Dark Fallen Prince Navarius constructed the Flesh Titan by using the corpses of storm giants native to the lands of Northrend. His creation helped the prince keep the region of Zul'Durek in his choking grip. Naturally, the king of the storm giants, Gaimer, was not too pleased about the corpses of his brethren being used in such a way. For some time, his people had been tormented by the Lich King and his servants. With the aid of an adventurer to help direct his might, Gaimer assaulted the Scourge of Zul'Durek, slaying countless soldiers. Algar the Chosen, who led the region's Vargal, and Prince Navarius himself. When Navarius fell, Thrym would attack Gaimer, screaming, "Master, no!" With the hero's aid, Gaimer was able to weather Thrym's attack and emerge the victor of the confrontation. Now we move on to our penultimate abomination type, the Flesh Giants. There are actually two varieties of Flesh Giant, the Naxxramas variety and the Northrend variety. The Naxxramas type was discovered first by adventurers when they ran into Grobbulus in the Construct Quarter. While the Northrend variety are abominations, I'm not sure whether the Nax type is. While it is a fusion of flesh and machine, it's difficult to tell whether it's made up of multiple corpses or a single large one, no stitching visible. Either way, since we're talking about Flesh Giants, we may as well briefly cover this variety too. Grobbulus also made a small appearance in the Ashbringer comic like Thaddius, appearing just before the Flesh Titan. In fact, Grobbulus's attack was even more devastating than Thaddius's, as he was able to kill a member of the party. He would knock most of the party into Thaddius's domain, but would pin Ferelyn Bloodscorn against a wall. As Grobbulus's mechanical arm held the struggling Blood Elf in place, he would bring his other arm round, plunging the needle on the end of it deep into the Blood Elf's gut, injecting large quantities of Naxxramas' living plague slime into the elf's body. Ferelyn would spend his last moments in agony, copiously vomiting before being flung off a ledge by Grobbulus and falling to his death into a whole pool of Naxxramas' slime. Grobbulus was the prototype for what was meant to be an army of flesh giants. The plague slime found all over Naxxramas was stored within his body. The recipient of an injection from the Goliath would more than likely flee back to their allies, but this was when Grobbulus's weapon was at its most effective. The plague would spread from the harbourer to the rest of their party, ending all their lives in painful, grisly fashion. The heroes that raided Naxxramas would experience Grobbulus's arsenal firsthand. A poison cloud emanated from his bloated form. He would spray his adversaries with toxic slime, which then coagulated into living fallout slimes, and he would inject heroes with his mutating injection. If injected, heroes would need to run from their allies, as they would soon give off a mutagen explosion, damaging anyone near them, and in the fallout leaving a cloud of poison that would linger for some time. There was no army of this flesh giant variety created. In fact, there was only one other produced within the Scourge. Bythius the Flesh Shaper wandered the avalanche in Sholzar Basin along with Cerberon and Glon, the two plague dogs mentioned earlier. To prevent further Scourge incursion into the basin, the avatar of Freya blocked their path. She was an embodiment of the Titanic Watcher Freya, the Watcher responsible for creating the realm of the Emerald Dream, which acted as a blueprint for Azeroth. The Avatar referred to herself as the Life Warden, and would do all she could to prevent the Scourge's relentless march. With the help of adventurers, the Avatar would battle the undead. She would also have adventurers investigate the destroyed Lifeblood Pillar. The 5 pillars of Sholzar meant the Scourge should not have been able to access this domain. They pulsed with pure life force, and as a result prevented the Scourge from getting access. The Avatar wanted to find out how the Scourge had managed to shatter the Lifeblood pillar to gain access. Adventurers discovered that the cult of the Damned were responsible, living members of the Scourge. With this information, she was able to help prevent the destruction of the Glimmering pillar too, Sholzar's northmost pillar. Despite thwarting the cult, Bythius and the Scourge of the Avalanche continued to push into Sholzar. The avatar of Freya became a little more desperate. She needed a weapon of amazing power. Luckily, she knew of one. But in order to get to it, heroes needed to open up a waygate that led to the lands of Kalimdor, to the region of Ungoro. After successfully operating the waygate, the hero would find the Etermidion on the other side. This Titan-crafted weapon was capable of stopping the undead in their tracks, a Titan forge similar in appearance to Arcadus. When summoned to the Avalanche, the Etermidion would slaughter hundreds of undead, including the Frostworm Hailscorn, Bythius the Flesh Shaper, and Urgreth of the Thousand Tombs, an example of the later variety of Flesh Giant. This Flesh Giant's construction is a lot more similar to that of the standard Abominations, being created from sewn together corpses. Urgeth's title of the Thousand Tombs may very well be literal. However, the parts used to create Flesh Giants are from finer stock, as there are several giant varieties that wander the frozen continent of Northrend. The Storm Giants, which by the appearance of the Flesh Giants seem to have their body parts used for most of these abominations, though it does appear that Ice Giants may have also been used in the construction of some. The Furnacefire Colossus is not the name of any of the Flesh Giants found within WoW. There are several name varieties of these Flesh Giants that heroes run into when in Northrend, only one of which is a dungeon boss, and the only Flesh Giant of his particular coloration, Forge Master Garfrost. He would be the first boss encounter heroes faced off against in the Pit of Sauron. This pit was located deep within the Lich King's territory and was rich in the mineral Saronite, said to be the hardened blood of the old god Yogg-Saron and ideal for creating armour and weaponry. Within the pit, Alliance and Horde prisoners were forced into manual labour or risked being tortured and transformed into another mindless member of the Scourge. Large quantities of Saronite would be presented to Forge Master Garfrost, known for his ability to craft some of the deadliest weapons the Scourge had ever used upon the living. He is not only admired for his quality, but speed as well, able to craft Saronite into instruments of death within a matter of moments. He would demonstrate this skill to adventurers by reforging his weapon midway through his fight with them, increasing his power. Many Flesh Giants in Northrend are the subjects of quests or rare mobs. Elusia Loon posts up a wanted poster for the death of Krug the Oathbreaker after he killed her husband, children and friends. Thiassi the Lightning Bringer in life was brother to the king of the Storm Giants, Geimer, but now carries the Grand Necrolord Antioch, who headed up the efforts to revive the ancient monolithic dragon Galakrond, an effort that heroes were able to prevent. Carnage was a challenge in the combat ring of Valhalla, where Varikal competed for the honour of becoming the Lich King's favoured undead, the Ymir Jar. Morbidus was considered the greatest creation of Icecrown's fleshworks, where multiple abominations were created, so naturally adventurers would seek to remove this powerful minion from the Lich King's armies. Putridus the Ancient was a rare mob that wandered the lands of Icecrown. After the Lich King's defeat, Garganox was a flesh giant that made his way to the Eastern Kingdoms to patrol lands still owned by the Scourge in the Eastern Plague Lands, the Noxious Glade. Another rare flesh giant would also appear in the Twilight Highlands around this time, controlled by the merciless one, Julak Doom. I've saved this final named flesh giant for last, as it is created in a different way to the others. Within the Varikal's Underhall in Valhalla, the undead Dr. Terrible worked upon his magnum opus, building a better flesh giant. He carried out experiments on Vargal, undead Varikals that were unfortunate enough not to become Ymir Jar. He was using the Vargal's body parts to construct a powerful flesh giant. He succeeded, creating Nergeld, and sought to make an entire army of his newly formulated giants. However, a hero was able to stop him by tampering with Nergeld. Infuriated someone dare touch his creation, Dr. Terrible attacked the hero, but the hero had been able to gain control of the flesh giant. Dr. Terrible was killed by his own creation. Well, this has been a much longer journey than I anticipated when I first sat down to write this, but we're here. Our final Abomination type. The peak of Scourge Abomination design. The Flesh Beast. The Death Knight Dark Transformation ability backs this claim, as when their abomination is changed into a more powerful undead, it becomes a flesh beast. Originally designed by the mad scientist Professor Putricide, flesh beasts appear to take elements from other abomination types to form an entirely new creature. Like the first abominations, they are made up of stitched together corpses, but appear to have elements of the plague dogs and flesh giants in their design. Inhuman eyes, animal maws and fur can be found on the flesh beasts, suggesting animal corpses make up part of its form. Flesh beasts are similar in stature to flesh giants. Their internal organs that sag from their belly and their bones are also large, suggesting the giants may be used when making a flesh beast too. Smaller arms protruding off the flesh beast either have animal origins or are made from parts of humanoid creatures. If that is the case, 3 types of flesh go into making one of these abominations. There's also a possibility that one of Putricide's original giants had part of its design inspired by the Naxxramas flesh giant variety too. In fact, let's look at him now, the Hearthstone legendary Rotface. This flesh beast was one of 2 of their type to be bosses in the Icecrown Citadel raid, an entirely new undead variety for the heroes that raided the halls of the Lich King. Rotface may not have an injection, but like Grobbulus, would attack adventurers using slime and ooze. Rotface's ooze and slime would damage many heroes at once and impede their movement speed, limiting their options in battle. He would also afflict heroes with his mutated infection. This would damage them over time, and upon expiration or dispelling would summon a living ooze to aid Rotface. These small oozes would radiate a damaging aura and slow the heroes further. The oozes would also seek each other out. When 2 met, they would bind together to form a large ooze. These did all that the smaller oozes did, but better. They were ticking time bombs, as if more oozes merged with the larger ooze, it would become unstable and explode, causing large amounts of damage to those that stood within the radius of the blast. Like other abomination types, Rotface exhibits low intelligence to ensure it does not develop its own free will, referring to Putricide as Daddy, using childlike slang such as "I think I made an angry poo-poo," and mispronouncing words. I broke the det. Rotface's brother is Festagut, who instead of spewing slime upon his foes, makes use of inhaling and expelling gas and spores from his body. When heroes attacked Festagut, his chamber would fill with gaseous blight. This would deal steady damage to the raid group. However, during the fight, Festagut would inhale the blight. Each time he did, its damage reduced, but Festagut's increased. After inhaling enough of the gas, Festagut would violently expel it from his body, heavily damaging the entire raid group, the blight returning to its initial intensity. Festagut's vile gas would cause heroes to uncontrollably vomit, which in turn hurt their allies. The monster would also infect heroes with a gaseous bloat, which if left to build would cause the hero's body to explode, killing them instantly. There was one flesh beast that came before Putricide's favourite children, his prototype, Festaface. After Icecrown's fall, the scientist had his experiments seized. Festaface would be imprisoned in the mage city-state Dalaran, within the Violet Hold. As the Burning Legion tried to assault the floating city using the prison as an entry point, they would release some of the prisoners to try and break through the last line of defence. Festaface was one of those creatures. Like Rotface, Festaface would use an ooze-based arsenal to fight heroes, and like Festagut, could consume the living ooze he summoned for a tactical benefit, restoring his energy. Putricide's Flesh Beast design did not die with him as Icecrown's Citadel fell before the Heroes of Azeroth. The Horde's Forsaken repurposed the design for their war efforts. Gorot would be used by the Forsaken as they fought the Worgen for control of Gilneas City. The Ray Gets Kalba monstrosity was created by the Forsaken Warden Stillwater. After the Lich King's defeat, Sylvanas would rely on the Valkyr to raise more Forsaken, a technique that Stillwater did not agree with. He preferred to create new undead through the use of Plague Blight, similar to the methods of the Lich King. He would use his preferred method when the Forsaken took the Hillsbrad Fields from the Alliance. This would go horribly wrong, reducing the farms to the Sludge Fields and giving birth to numerous uncontrollable undead. One of those created by Stillwater's Blight was the Flesh Beast, only this one was only made up of human parts. The corpses of the human farmers Ray, Getz and Kalba merged together to become a hideous creature. Stillwater would hire adventurers to clean up his mess, nervous his foible would reach the ears of the Dark Lady. However, this would backfire on him, the adventurer eventually helping to mete out Stillwater's death sentence. Not all Forsaken would create their flesh beasts for the good of the Forsaken war effort. After creating his Abomination, which we mentioned near at the beginning of this episode, the insane Calder Grey would appear in the Twilight Highlands. The Forsaken had been unceremoniously cast out from Orgrimmar, the reasoning not revealed. Grey would pit his latest creation, Cadaver Collage, against heroes in the Crucible of Carnage, a gladiatorial arena ran by the goblin Gurthok. Finally, we have Mushlump, a dungeon boss that replaced Glutton in Razor Fen Downs in the Warlords of Draenor expansion. It was a creation of Deathspeaker Blackthorn of the Death's Head Quillbore, the conglomeration of various failed experiments filled with bile, pus, and noxious fumes. The Deathspeaker had Mushlump guard the path that led to where the Quillbore was attempting to resurrect Amnanar. So, there you have it. The lore behind each Abomination type that exists within the Warcraft universe, and a look at the named characters from each variety, such as the Terror of Darkshire, Stitches. Who could have known that these undead horrors could have had so much information behind them? I certainly didn't. I was kind of expecting this to be a short little episode, but why just cover the classic Abomination when you can cover them all? For anyone to have made it all the way through with me, thank you so much for watching, I really appreciate it. If you'd like to support the channel, subscribe if you haven't already, and turn on notifications to get informed each time I release a video. If you want the channel to perform better in this giant space we call YouTube, hit the like button, leave a comment letting me know what you thought, and share it with your friends. You can also hit the dislike button if you want to piss all over my hard work. Love you. To keep up to date with Six Gamers, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and what I mostly use now, Instagram. And to catch my Friday streams at 10 PM GMT, follow me on Twitch. If you like the art, I've done my best to credit the artists in the description. Again, thank you so much for watching. You're awesome, and until next time, happy Hearthstoning.